The New Testament is the second major part of the Bible. It is a collection of Christian works written during the first century at various times by different writers, who were early Jewish followers of Jesus. It discusses the teachings of Jesus as well as the first century events of Christianity. Most editions of the New Testament consist of 27 books attributed to 8 different authors, 6 of whom are numbered among the apostles: Matthew, John, Paul, James, Peter, and Jude. They also contain 4 biographies of Jesus, the Gospels, 1 history book of the early church, Acts, 21 letters, the Romans to Jude, and the Apocalypse, Revelation.
The first 4 books of the New Testament, the canonical Gospels, written by the apostles Mark, John, Luke, and Matthew, follow Jesus' life from his birth to death to resurrection and then ascension into heaven. Throughout the book, Jesus performs many miracles. By contrasting various other texts created independent of the New Testament and the New Testament itself, it's possible to gain the rough date of Jesus' birth, which is roughly around 6 BC, and his death on the cross happened around 30 AD. No matter if the other events were real or not, it has been proven that a Jewish figure by the name of Jesus of Nazareth existed at the time and was crucified by Pontius Pilate. That doesn't mean that God is real or that he was the Son of God, just that he did in fact exist. This brings us back to the miracles themselves and the truth behind them. A miracle he performed was the feeding of 5,000 with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, as seen in John chapter 6, verses 1 to 14. Many believe that instead of turning this small amount of food into enough for 5,000, it was that Jesus' presence or actions convinced those who had food to share with those around them, allowing everyone there to be fed. Reasoning such as these can be found for the other miracles as well. There are many other events such as these which have been recorded by those not a part of Christianity, such as Josephus, a Jewish scholar, and Tacitus, a Roman senator and historian. As a whole, it can be proven that a Jesus of Nazareth did exist as a major Jewish religious figure, and was crucified on the cross. But it remains to be seen whether or not various stories and miracles can truly be proven.
The New Testament is by far the best historical document showing Jesus' life. It contains the most numerous and most detailed accounts of his life, therefore making it extremely important. But some question its credibility and reliability. The following criteria is put into consideration when determining the historical reliability of the Gospels.
After an event that appears to be preserved down multiple lines of independent tradition is more likely to be true than one that is preserved only down a single line. Similarities in accounts in the Gospel confirms the multiple attestation criterion, as multiple disciples have mentioned and included similar events. Events that were mentioned in all 4 Gospels include events such as the feeding of 5,000, the Last Supper, and the crucifixion of Jesus. Even though the events were accounted for slightly differently, the general story was accounted for. The reasons for the variation in text is because the authors were addressing a specific audience. These variations suggest that there were no collaborations with one another, which further enhances its credibility.
A fact or event that appears to cause embarrassment to the theology of the Gospel authors is less likely to have been invented by them than a fact or event that bolsters their theology. Examples of embarrassment are seen in all 4 Gospels, recording that the first people to discover Jesus' empty tomb were women. Women were considered as unreliable sources during the 1st century. A primary argument against the reliability of the New Testament texts is how the copies of the New Testament we read today reflect originals destroyed almost 2 millennia ago. Because communication is not always perfect, errors can be compounded over successive generations. The text could be completely distorted. In the entire text of 20,000 lines, only 40 lines are in doubt, and none affect anything of significance. That's it.
A rule that many believe contributes to the reliability of historical source is the time between the event and its recording. The earlier the better. The Gospels were most likely written in the 1st century, within 60 to 70 years of Jesus' death, approximately 30 AD. This small difference between the time of the actual events and the time of recording confirms that the events are less likely to be distorted.
Gospels or any other written sources about Jesus were compiled. Jesus' followers were carefully passing on accounts of his teachings and mighty works by word of mouth. This kept the historical events alive until the time they were written down.
The fact that these writers had distinct ideological or theological views does not mean that they had biased or distorted events. The authors of the New Testament texts assured that their accounts were accurately written, for they know that their cause will be undermined if they were caught putting a spin on the event.
But there are alternate views on the topic. Many believe that the key aspects of the Bible have either been exaggerated or made up. There are also people who believe that the New Testament is not valid, as many events in the Old Testament lacked evidence, like the Great Flood, thinking it is likely that this holds true for the New Testament as well. An example of an alternative view on the reliability of the New Testament is the perspective of historian E.L. Dwyer. Dwyer believes that a modern approach to the New Testament is a method that has evolved from many other sources. It is the study of other sources that discusses the life of Jesus and comparing it to the New Testament to determine its reliability. Through the use of other sources, Dwyer has determined that the New Testament may in fact be not as reliable as we think. There are obvious connections between the New Testament and many other sources that depict Jesus. However, Dwyer believes that the New Testament is primarily focused on its environment, with attention given to the historical situation that evokes a message. This means that the New Testament gives attention to Jesus and completely ignores the rest of history occurring at the time. This gives a significant lack of context, resulting in difficulty to completely understand what truly took place throughout Jesus' life. Dwyer believes that significant segments of the New Testament may have been misinterpreted, as there are other primary sources that depict Jesus' miracles in very different ways. Dwyer does not believe that the New Testament is false, but rather that it is inaccurate, proving to be unreliable.